My name's Tim Kenny from Tim Kenny Surveying, and today in this video I wanted to talk about checking ventilation systems using toilet paper, which I know doesn't sound exciting, but genuinely I think this is a really interesting topic. Firstly, because it's something that really kind of came up in an inspection I carried out last week. I think also it relates back to the video I did recently on dent. So this is kind of the method for taking this methodical approach to assessing building defects. And I think also it speaks a bit about the importance or the role of us as surveyors and those of us surveyors who generally carry out non-invasive testing. For those that don't know or aren't aware, so you can check the function of a ventilation system, to a bathroom in particular, by putting a bit of toilet paper up to it and see if it sticks, right? If the system is functioning, it will hold the toilet paper. If it is not functioning or functioning badly, then the toilet paper will fall off. It's a fairly kind of rough and ready kind of field test for the function of a system. I think it's a useful check. I probably shouldn't use the word test. It is a check for the function of the system, because it's really important to recognize there is a massive limit to that check, right? What it's actually telling us is that system has the ability to hold up some toilet paper. That's literally what it's telling us. We can infer things from that, but it doesn't tell us the flow rate of the system. It doesn't tell us whether that system is sufficient for ventilating the room that it's supposed to be ventilating. It doesn't tell us whether it's working at its required capacity. It just gives us this really broad indication of whether it does actually work. Does it draw in air? Does it draw in air sufficiently to hold it up? Right? And that is still a useful bit of information. It gives us a broad indication of the fact that there is ventilation present and that it is working, right? Because it is possible to have a ventilation system there and it really not be doing much, either because it's got blocked up with dust and all sorts of other crud that gets up there, or it's been installed with a massive length of a flexible duct, which is really going to slow down the air, and that's all got kinked up and everything else, or it's been blocked inside the way, or it's just really highly underpowered to start with. All of these issues that can exist in a ventilation system, right? So it gives us a clue as to the quality or the kind of the function of that system, even if it doesn't tell us the specifics of it. And that's useful, right? It's limited. We must always acknowledge its limits, but it still tells us something, right? And to kind of refer it back to my video on dent, that's part of your define process. So when we're defining the defect, so dent is define, explore, narrow, and test. So as part of our definition of that defect, we're saying, actually, instead of just walking and going, yep, this is a condensation issue, or the definition actually is going to be there is black mould and moisture everywhere. What you're actually going to say is there's black mould and there's moisture everywhere. There is a ventilation system. It is functioning to the degree that it will hold up toilet paper. Right? That becomes your definition, as opposed to just there is black mould and there is water everywhere. That little bit of extra information takes us a bit more further along. It allows us to generate better hypotheses for the possible cause of the black mould. For example, if we're looking at that as our defect, gives us a bit more of a clue along that way. It also helps us with the testing element of our inspection. So when we look at testing, we're generally talking about that kind of that stage beyond the non-invasive. We're kind of going into how do we explore further? What other testing? What specialist skills can we bring into this to really kind of track down and crack what is causing this defect? And within that, there's this principle that we start with the simplest and easiest options. We try and prioritize that testing, right? And we try and kind of make it cost effective as well. We have to be mindful of our clients' expenditure in most situations. So of course, if you're going to prioritize, if you've already checked the function, if you think it is doing something and it's doing a reasonable job within the context of what we can tell from the toilet paper check, that's probably not going to be the priority of your tests at this stage. You're going to focus on other elements of the testing. So if we talk about condensation, you're going to focus on heating, you're going to focus on heat loss, you're going to focus on maybe on moisture generation within the space. Trickier with the bathroom, but you can think about all of those things. If obviously a part of the testing process it's eliminated all of those, then yeah, you would come back to the ventilation, but it wouldn't be your starting point because you've carried out that initial check, right? And I think that in itself is useful, right? Now, of course, yes, you still would come back to it and it's still going to be part of the process, but you've moved it along that little bit a step further stage. And this is where I kind of start to think about our role as surveyors. Most surveyors, whether that is, residential surveyors like me carrying out mainly home surveys, or those looking specifically more at building defects and that building pathology side of it. The way I view our role, certainly in that initial stage, is essentially as a triage nurse. When you go to A&E, first person you're going to see, apart from the receptionist and everyone else in the waiting room for many hours, is going to be the triage nurse, who is going to check and kind of assess how serious your conditions are and make that initial assessment of what needs to be done and where you can best be helped through the process. And that's kind of what we should be doing as surveyors. It's how we kind of should see ourselves. A lot of people talk about, oh, we should be like the GP. I really do think we're more like the nurse, and I think that is not downplaying us. And I think because of the way the system work and the way nurses work, that is probably almost a credit to us, and probably even overstating our competence when you compare us to the competency of many nurses that I've dealt with in my life. But their job is, hey, you're walking in, you don't know what you're going to find most of the time. You've got to pull in all of this information that you can. You've got to assess it through a process. And then you've got to collect that information together in a way that then can be passed on to somebody else to make the more informed assessment. Yes, a lot of the times we can come up with a definitive answer to a lot of stuff, but there's always going to be these things that we need that further information because we're always limited. Because 9 times out of 10 we're not going to start knocking holes in people's walls the first time we get there. So we have to kind of start on that non-invasive process and bring this triage element into what we do. And again, checking that ventilation system allows us to triage better. Because, of course, we're not just saying, okay, you've got a condensation problem, you're going to have to check all of these things. We're going to say you've got a condensation problem, you are going to have to check all of these things, but you might want to check these things first. Check how well this property is being heated. Check, are there major cold spots going on? Maybe think about thermography first, address that, and then come back to the ventilation if it's still relevant, as opposed to just saying, there is a condensation problem, you can do this, and this, right? Because to be quite honest, the client walking into I'll come back to a particular property that I went to recently. Black mold growing on the walls, literally water running down the walls. The condensation problem was so severe. Client's going to know that anyway. Most clients are going to see the black mold. Everyone is now, probably most people are now very aware of the risks and issues around black mold and what it means because of the quite reasonable publicity that it's had in recent years. So me just saying there's a condensation problem, you know what, could have said that myself, mate. It's how most clients would think. But saying there's a condensation problem and I have considered the ventilation and it appears to be functioning reasonably well, I've carried out this level of check. Yes, it doesn't tell me everything, but it tells me something. And that means actually when you're going to investigate this issue, you're going to have to focus on these bits first and then maybe come back to it. That's what I've achieved by just that simple measure. And I think that to me kind of says something about what we as surveyors should do, how we should consider our role and add something to the process for our home buyers. Hopefully you found that helpful. Any questions, comments, thoughts or opinions, always get in touch, let me know. Thank you very much.